In this tutorial we're going to step through the process of creating a trim sheet library from an existing trim sheet. If you haven't yet created a trim sheet, you can follow the DecalMaster trim sheet baking tutorial video to create the textures required. Once you're ready, open the trim sheet editor tool. Select New Trim Sheet. It's a good idea to create a descriptive name for the trim sheet to make it easier to manage. Before we can create the trims, we need to assign the trim sheet texture files to their corresponding maps. Notice how the trim sheet's resolution updates automatically. The only required texture maps are either the color map or the normal map. If this is a normal mapped trim sheet, it is recommended to include a height map to control the parallax effect. The textures will be copied over to the trim sheet library folder upon saving. Now that the trim sheet is set up, next we will cut trims out. Let's go through the tools. First there is the Create Trim Rect tool. This will create a rectangle that initially covers the entire trim sheet. Using the mouse, you can scale the rect down to cover only the trim you want to cut out. Next there is the Duplicate Selected Trim tool, which will create a copy of the current trim rect. After duplicating, you can then slide and scale the new trim rect to cover another trim on the trim sheet. Note that it's perfectly fine if trims overlap on the trim sheet. In fact, using multiple portions of a trim is a good way to get more out of a trim sheet. When multiple trims overlap, it can get difficult to select the trim you want. To solve this, you have the Lock Selection toggle and the Visibility toggle tools to use. You also have the Global toggle tools to quickly control everything on the trim sheet. DecalMaster treats trims differently depending on whether they repeat or not. All the trims so far have been repeating trims, so I'll leave the flag on. However, the remaining trims are decal trims, and so it is important to toggle this flag off. This is another good example where using multiple overlapping trims would allow you to get more out of the trim sheet. Once you have finished cutting trims out of the trim sheet, it's time to save. You're now ready to place trims from the trim sheet library. After saving the library, its trims will be immediately available from the Trims section in the radial menu. In the future you'll be able to make a decal library from the trims you've cut out of a trim sheet. If there are any issues with the trims, you of course can go back to the trim sheet editor and make adjustments. When detailing a mesh using DecalMaster, it is recommended to use a combination of decals and trims. You can achieve high texel density across large surface areas using repeating trims, then overlay unique surface details anywhere on the mesh using decals.